So I thought Joe Kwong and I were friends until I saw that she'd slated me to speak after Heather Reynolds. So yeah. So you just got the Mick Jagger of the nonprofit world, and I am going to be sitting on the floor singing Kumbaya. So you've been warned. My name is Valerie Holloway Skinner, and I have the great privilege of introducing Scott Hanson today, but I actually can't speak with a microphone any other way without telling a story. So I'm going to have to tell a short story about our family and our family foundation, and I hope that sets Scott up well for what you're really here to hear about. And it looks like we're a little ahead, so I can tell a story. This is great. I also do have a script because I tend to ramble. The world lost my father, Graham Holloway, to Alzheimer's disease in October of 2009, and right before he passed away, the week before, my daughter was in college at the time, and she flew into Dallas from Nashville to see her papa. And because of the effects of Alzheimer's disease, my dad actually no longer recognized her as his granddaughter. But I'll never forget, take it to my own grave, when she walked into his hospital room, he spoke the clearest, most lucid sentence we had heard him say in probably years. He looked her right in the face and he said, "Well, you're a pretty girl, but you're still gonna need a good job." And that, and you know what? He was right. She did need a good job, and she worked really hard in school, and when she graduated from college, she got one. But it defined for us, and because of my dad's just strong work ethic and his belief in the value of a good job, that literally he maintained until the last days of his life. Our Family Foundation trustees have focused on supporting career skills, career development for individuals who've not been as fortunate as my daughter. And it's been our great privilege to be able to do that. And so we recognize, obviously, and it's been mentioned many times today, that a good job is a pathway out of poverty. It is a vehicle towards economic security. But our family, personally, and we get to invest this because it is our family, we believe that a job actually does so much more, and that even people who are working who don't earn a paycheck are involved in things that are so much more important than just holding a job. We actually believe that the community of people who work is different than the community of people who do not work. And we believe that work gives people a sense of personal worth, value, and belonging in a community that the people that are not working are on the outside of. We also believe that being on the outside of your community for any reason is discouraging and debilitating, especially if you've been separated from that world because you're not in a position to participate in work. So our next speaker, Scott, and that's just a little bit about our family. Our next speaker, Scott Hanson, you probably can't tell him much about what it feels like to be on the outside, because he shared a story with me that I'd like to share with you about when he was a young boy. His family grew up for the first formative years in a very small village in Japan. And little tow-headed, blue-eyed Scotty didn't look like his classmates in that Japanese school. And so he was bullied and beaten up by his peers just because he looked different than they looked. And then when his family moved back stateside, he was bullied and beaten up again because he had adapted some Japanese culture into the way that he walked and talked, and that kind of set him on the outside. And he also learned to read Japanese from the bottom of the page to the top instead of in English from left to the right. So that was a difficult circumstance for him, but his experiences, he believes, and I believe also, because of what we know about Scott and about Serve West Dallas, that these experiences uniquely qualified him to serve West Dallas with compassion and with great empathy and understanding. So Scott transitioned from the business world in banking and real estate, communications in Dallas into this nonprofit sector. I believe that God led him to do that, leveraged his unique experiences into leading what we believe is one of Dallas's great success stories of urban transformation. So as Scott will explain to you, he was the architect of a unique group of partners in Dallas working together to place these under-resourced youth in West Dallas on a pathway to jobs as patient care techs, which we've talked about. Because of his efforts, I personally believe that a group of young adults whose family have been on the outside of working for generations will now have the opportunity to participate in the world of work, to be in a professional environment in a way that's never happened in their families before, and that for the first time in their lives, I believe that they'll have a vision for a future that comes from having a good job. So Scott.
Well, thank you, Valerie. Valerie was sweet to share that experience because it was an experience in my life that really created some significant barriers to the rest of my life, particularly, well, I would say during the youthful years, my young adult years, because what happened when my parents unknowingly and unwittingly, when the village fathers of that little community came, and that little village came to my parents and said, would you honor us by sending your son to our school? Little did they know that it would set me on a journey that would create certain barriers in my life that would be a challenge. But it gave me a unique viewpoint on life. And what happened as a result of all that was I had to figure out on my own kind of the hidden nature of the culture that I was born into, but the culture I was a part of. Because I learned to read and write Japanese before English, and then I learned to speak Japanese fluently, I knew far more about the Japanese culture. So when I went back into the English culture, it was a rough transition, and I was made fun of because I was different. I was different in the Japanese culture, and I was different back in the American culture when I entered grade school there. I share that because those barriers are much like the barriers that young people today, and we work with in our program a group of kids from 18 to 24 that are called Opportunity Youth. They lack, a lot of them, good work experience. A lot of them lack the opportunities that many of us have, and a lot of them have just minimal education. And one of the things that is one of the greatest barriers is how do you take somebody out of a poverty mindset and move them into a business professional mindset, which is built, as most businesses are, on a middle class mentality. It's just a huge, huge disparity. So what we have done, I'll show you some of these young men and women. This is actually our first group of what we call fellows. Each and every one of them have a story in and of themselves. Their stories are varied. Abuse, adverse childhood experiences of all sorts, sexual abuse, having children out of wedlock. One of the individuals here has 2 children, and she's only 20 years of age. So how will she support herself and those children the rest of their lives? The young man in the back was an individual that worked 2 jobs at a distribution center during the day and at night as a security guard. It's a real sweet story, but one night at 2 in the morning, he's sitting in his security shack and he just calls out to God. He says, what is all this leading to? He said, I don't see it leading to any place. And next morning, one of our community-based organizations, which is a part of this collaboration, in fact, there are 12 organizations that have come together to form this collaboration, called him and said, let me tell you about a program I'd like to get you into. And so he got into the program. Each one of these kids are stories in and of themselves. Each one of these kids come to us with barriers. So what do? What you see here is a graph, and what pulls this together is a tremendous collaboration between organizations that all, out of their silos, are now working together to make all this possible. So our first 90 days, we take and we bring them in and we're really looking at their areas of risk. How great is the risk that they've experienced in life, and how can we begin to work with that so they can begin to progress on? And as you notice, as we're progressing, they're earning certifications. Now, this is to get them to become a patient care tech within Baylor Scott and White. In fact, last week we added our second hospital, which is down in South Dallas, Methodist Charlton. So we bring them in, and after the 90 days, they're hired by Baylor Scott and White, and through a series of on-the-job training, and they begin work on their third certification, which is actually through DCCCD. They're working on their national nurse or national patient care tech certification. The program runs for about 2 years, but the key to it is that because these kids come out of backgrounds without a lot of support systems, we provide them with a case manager and a mentor who actually is an employee of the hospital that works with them. And let me tell you what that work is like. These kids, I'd say kids, but young adults, they come and, for instance, one of them 2 weeks ago walked into the room with a patient and said, "Ooh, this smells terrible. Who pooped?" Well, obviously that was not the appropriate thing to say, okay? So a young person like that in the hospital industry, in Baylor Scott and White, I'll tell you, all the hospitals within the area have a 40% turnover. Think about that churn. Baylor Scott and White, as a teaching hospital, has a 50% turnover. The tolerance is so little or so tight that if a mistake is made, that person loses their job. So continuing to refer to it as poop, rather than understanding that there is a language that should be used within the culture of the organization. All those things are things that have to be dealt with in order to help them keep their job. So that mentor, who is a veteran nurse, spends time with them every day talking through the issues. And if a supervisor or line supervisor says, "I have an issue, could you help me?" she has the resource of both the case manager and the mentor to work with the individuals. The idea is, because these kids come out of the environments they come out of, they have a poverty mindset versus an achievement mindset, which is the middle class mindset. They have to be helped. We run them through a class, but that doesn't mean we catch everything. So that's why the beauty of having both a case manager and a mentor working with them all the time keeps them on track, and then we have a career manager that then helps them to pick and choose, and the whole objective is to get them into a middle skill job where they'll earn anywhere from $40,000 to $70,000. And this program offers them multiple entry and exit points because of the work that we're doing all the way along the line to not only allow them to have a job, but to get the credentials, and it's stackable credentials, in which DCCD plays a significant part in helping us to do that, customizing what we need to do in order to keep them on the job, but at the same time to earn the credentials so they can move into a middle skill job eventually. So that is the work of Serve West Dallas. The collaboration is comprised of 12 organizations, DISD, DCCD, several community-based organizations. United Way has been a part of it. The organizations, we work together every week. There's some form of communication that we're having between us. Whether it's a conference call, but we're all working towards the common goal of how do we get each one of these individual kids to advance onto a higher degree. So that's our story. Starting with a story of somebody who really understood what it was like to have barriers in their life. that I had to overcome, but didn't have the support to overcome those barriers, these kids also have a lot of barriers that we have to work with to help them overcome. Thank you.